The effects of the Birmingham bin strike have been declared a major incident. They are a national embarrassment, and with 21-degree temperatures forecast later this week, will become a public health emergency. With Labour MPs in Birmingham busy campaigning for an airport in Pakistan, and the Secretary of State unwilling to visit the city or take on the Union Unite, is that because of the tens of millions of pounds her party receives from Unite, or indeed the £10,000 she's received for her own election campaign?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thought the Shadow Secretary was beneath that and better than that, but hey-ho. Look, this is a local dispute, and it's right that the negotiations are led locally, Mr. Speaker. We've been clear that both parties should get round the table, and I'm pleased that this happened on Sunday and talks continue today.
She still doesn't explain why she's not visited the city to look at this firsthand.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, I thought he was going to do better, but he didn't. The minister was in Birmingham on Thursday, and I'm always happy to visit Birmingham. It's a great city, and it's always been a fantastic place, and I've probably been there more times than the honourable member has, actually.
Parliament turned into a spectacle today, and Keir Starmer found himself at the centre of it all. The uproar began when a member of the opposition ripped into Labour's freshly polished manifesto, tearing apart its promises one by one. The chamber, packed with MPs, erupted into laughter not because the comments were clever, but because no one could believe how far the government's narrative had stretched. What was supposed to be a blueprint for national progress suddenly became a punchline. The reaction went beyond political theatre. Those waves of laughter felt like a warning to the Prime Minister and his cabinet. For weeks, critics have accused the government of dressing up the country's economic struggles with flowery language and selective numbers. Joblessness is creeping upward, inflation continues to bite, and debt is ballooning. Yet the official story paints a picture of recovery and stability.
Labour doesn't have a grip on our economy. Last week, I talked about Labour's mess on inflation and welfare spending. This week, there's more bad news. We found out from the ONS that Labour borrowed £20 billion in June in just 1 month. That's a hell of a lot of money. It's one of the biggest borrowing sprees on record. Labour is now spending £100 billion a year just on debt interest. Twice as much as Britain spends on defence. That's extraordinary. That would be bad enough in normal times, but now borrowing costs so much more. And what that means for you is bills rising, mortgages staying high, and people wondering, is work still worth it? It doesn't need to be like this. Conservatives didn't get everything right in government. You know that, I know that. But we brought the budget deficit down year after year until the pandemic, with discipline and responsibility. That meant wages rose, inflation came down, the UK economy became the fastest growing in the G7 when we left office. Things got worse when Labour got in, because they won't make the difficult decisions. The only answer they have is to tax you more for worse services, higher prices, and a shrinking economy. Labour and reform offer the same thing. More borrowing, more debt, more taxes. Only the Conservatives will make the tough choices and back the people driving Britain forward.
But the real shock wasn't the ridicule itself, it was what came next. Angela Rayner faced questions about a long-delayed report on grooming gangs and the government's handling of sensitive cases. Instead of showing urgency or transparency, Labour leaders appeared evasive, more interested in burying the issue than addressing it. That hesitation only added fuel to the scepticism already burning in Parliament, where MPs on both sides were starting to wonder what else might be getting swept out of sight. Now, it's time to break down why this laughter may be the least of Starmer's problems.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I begin by warmly congratulating the Prime Minister on his first year in office, acknowledge that the Labour manifesto was beautifully written, deeply moving, and like that other great blockbuster of hope and redemption, The Salt Path, a total pack of lies. With joblessness, inflation, and debt ballooning, his personal ratings collapsing, and his backbenchers on a work to rule, could the Prime Minister, Could the Prime Minister recommend a summer recess read in order to take all our minds away from the calamitous journey on which he and the Chancellor have embarked?
I think most of the backbenchers are already on their summer recess, looking at the benches opposite Mr. Speaker. We are very proud of our manifesto. It was a very successful manifesto, giving a landslide victory, and now we're very proud to be implementing it.
As the chamber settled, Graham Stewart took the floor, making it clear he had no intention of easing the pressure on the Prime Minister. He opened by acknowledging Starmer's first year in office, but his tone carried more sting than sincerity. Stewart highlighted the growing cracks in Labour's leadership, pointing to collapsing approval ratings, a restless economy, and backbench MPs who seem more focused on coasting through sessions than defending their own government. The criticism cut deeper when he turned to the manifesto itself. Stewart painted it as a beautifully packaged illusion, a glossy campaign promise now unraveling in plain sight. For him and many others, the grand pledges Labour touted have done little to mask a reality of rising debt, stalled growth, and a widening disconnect between Downing Street and ordinary Britons. To drive his point home, Stewart jabbed at the benches opposite, noting how many MPs already looked like they had mentally checked out for the summer, leaving the government's defence looking half-hearted at best. Starmer, when given the chance to respond, stuck to his usual script. He pointed to the landslide that brought Labour into power, praised the manifesto as a success, and insisted that its policies were being rolled out as planned. But his response did little to calm the murmurs in the room. For many listening, it sounded like more of the same practiced speech, rather than a genuine answer to the growing frustration swelling inside Parliament and across the country.
Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The chair of the working group for anti-Muslim hatred and Islamophobia, Dominic Grieve, who was appointed by the Secretary of State, has a previously stated preference for a definition of Islamophobia that would shut down talk of religion in cases like the Grooming gangs scandal. All other members of that committee, again appointed by the Secretary of State, are adherents of the Muslim faith. Does the Secretary of State not share our concerns that their report and recommendations will be seen as predetermined and biased?
Secretary of State.
No, Mr. Speaker, I don't. And there's no blasphemy law in this country because the last Labour government got rid of it. But this kind of, incendiary language, Mr. Speaker, is beneath the shadow Secretary of State.
Kevin Hollinray.
Language, I was merely stating the facts. That's the reality. She was right in one regard. Freedom of speech is on the line. The current position is that the report will be for the government eyes only and the decision on a definition will be taken in private. Will she at least commit to making the full report publicly available so it can be scrutinised by this House and elsewhere before a decision is taken?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as set out in the terms of reference, the independent working group will submit their findings to ministers. We will then consider their recommendations and set out the next steps. I would urge the members to let the independent group get on with their work, and if he has views, feed them in as part of the call for evidence.
The tension in Parliament didn't ease when the focus shifted to the government's handling of a report on Islamophobia and grooming gangs. Questions arose about the independence of the working group overseeing the report, with critics arguing that its members, nearly all tied by faith or previous statements on definitions of Islamophobia, risked producing recommendations that would appear biased before the findings were even released. The bigger issue wasn't just the group's composition, but the secrecy surrounding its work. Ministers confirmed that the report, once completed, would initially be reviewed behind closed doors, before any decision was made on whether the public, or even MPs, would get to see it. That admission sent ripples through the chamber. To many, it felt like another example of uncomfortable truths being buried under layers of official procedure. Calls for full transparency grew louder, especially as public trust in the government's willingness to confront grooming scandals has been steadily eroding.
Help to Buy helped 350,000 young first-time buyers. The stamp duty discount helped 640,000 first-time buyers get on the housing ladder, with discounts of up to £11,000. Both now scrapped. Is the Secretary of State pulling up the housing ladder behind her?
So State.
Mr. Speaker, it's staggering that the Shadow Secretary of State says that after so many people now can't get housing because of his government failed to meet their housing targets. We will have a mortgage guarantee scheme. We will build 1.5 million homes so that young people and people can get the houses they deserve.
Kevin Hollinray.
Well, try again. The manifesto promised to preserve the green belt, and then grey belt came along, which is supposed to be a few garage forecourts. Now it turns out that grey belt will mean 640 square miles of green belt are built upon, the size of Surrey. Is this simply another broken promise?
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I'll try again. Under the Tories, the number of homes approved on greenfield land increased nearly tenfold since 2009. Labour will be strategic in grey belt release, and we will have a brownfield first policy.
While Parliament wrestled with secrecy and accountability, another storm was brewing on GB News, one that may prove far more damaging to Labour's public image than a day of laughter in the Commons. Colin Rayner, a veteran farmer with nearly 50 years in British agriculture and a family lineage on the land dating back to the Victorian era, took to the airwaves to accuse Labour's Environment Secretary of misleading the public about the true state of rural policy and farming subsidies. For viewers, it was not just another talking head sounding off. Rayner embodies the backbone of Britain's food supply, and his message was clear. Decades of family farming traditions are being pushed to the brink by a government that talks of sustainability but delivers strangling regulation and neglect. During a heated, unfiltered exchange, Rayner singled out several government initiatives that, in his eyes, are pushing Britain's agricultural sector toward collapse. Among them is the Environmental Land Management Scheme, ELMS, a program designed to replace EU-era subsidies by rewarding biodiversity and conservation over food production. Rayner argued that while wildflower corridors and pollinator-friendly projects sound admirable on paper, they divert critical land away from crops and livestock. At the same time, international carbon offset commitments, which channel hundreds of millions of pounds into overseas projects, have left farmers in Yorkshire, Cumbria, and Cornwall struggling to pay basic costs. Rayner summed it up bluntly: "We are watching the land that once fed Britain turned into nature reserves for photo ops, while imported beef and grain fill our shelves." This frustration is backed by stark figures. Since Brexit, the UK's domestic farming sector has seen an estimated 10% reduction in small family farms, with the National Farmers Union warning that nearly 30% of farmers are considering selling their land within the next 5 years. Food production has not kept pace with population growth, forcing Britain to rely on imports for over 46% of its food, up from 35% a decade ago. While environmental advocates hail these changes as progress toward net zero emissions, farmers argue they amount to economic sabotage, stripping rural communities of their purpose while pushing food prices higher for consumers already grappling with inflation. Rayner also turned his ire toward the rapid conversion of prime farmland into solar projects and housing developments. While such conversions are often justified as economic growth and clean energy expansion, they come at a cost. The campaign to protect rural England has documented the loss of over 3.0 hectares of Grade 1 agricultural land to non-agricultural use since 2020, a trend that experts warn is eroding Britain's long-term food security. "We are told we're the custodians of the countryside," Rayner said, "but how can we be custodians when our land is sold to the highest bidder, or turned into an energy farm while actual farming withers?" His words resonated not just with farmers but with butchers, grocers, market traders, and consumers watching their weekly bills rise. Across the country, local communities are watching family-owned farms shutter and sell off, leaving gaps that are quickly filled by multinational corporations or foreign investors who prioritize profit over local resilience. In some rural regions, the average age of a farm owner has crept above 59, and young workers are leaving the trade entirely, lured away by more stable, less stressful jobs. For these communities, promises about sustainable growth ring hollow when barns sit empty and fields lie fallow. This discontent feeds directly into the wider narrative of a government that many feel is out of touch and evasive. In Parliament, Labour ministers have faced repeated accusations of burying unflattering reports, including one on Islamophobia that opposition MPs claim could expose divisions within the party. While such controversies may dominate political chatter in London, it is the frustration outside Westminster farms, in markets, and across provincial high streets that is slowly becoming a more serious threat to Labour's credibility. People see a government eager to talk about international goals and future visions, but slow to address the immediate crises affecting everyday life. What makes this moment particularly dangerous for Labour is the coalition of voices uniting in frustration. It is no longer just Conservative voters venting their anger. Urban families hit by rising food costs, small business owners frustrated by supply chain issues, and rural families watching centuries of tradition unravel are now speaking with a shared tone. They want transparency, real action, and leaders willing to admit that current policies are not working. The stakes go beyond a dip in poll numbers. If these frustrations continue to build, Labour risks triggering a political backlash that could spill into by-elections, local council results, and even the next general election. British farming, after all, is not just an economic issue. It is tied to national identity, cultural heritage, and the very idea of self-sufficiency. To ignore the cries of the people who work the land is to gamble with more than just GDP risks, alienating communities that have historically been a stabilizing force in British society. For now, Rayner's warning serves as a stark reminder that beneath the headlines and the parliamentary laughter, there is a deeper story unfolding. Britain's food producers, already battered by Brexit adjustments, global market volatility, and rising operational costs, are now being asked to shoulder the weight of environmental transformation without the financial and logistical support they need to survive. If something does not change, the country could find itself dependent on foreign imports, not because of market choice, but because its domestic farmers were regulated and taxed out of existence. If you believe these voices deserve more attention, help keep the spotlight on them. Hit the like button so more people hear these concerns, subscribe so you never miss updates the mainstream outlets overlook, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Should the government face greater pressure to release the full Islamophobia report to restore public trust? Are Britain's farmers being sacrificed for political optics and international targets? Or is Parliament's laughter a symbol of how detached politicians have become from the people they claim to represent? Your engagement keeps these debates alive and sends a message to those in power that Britain's people, rural and urban alike, will not sit quietly while their future is negotiated away.